The courtroom was packed with spectators when my wife Victoria stood up and pointed her perfectly manicured finger at me. Her voice echoed off the mahogany walls as she declared to the judge, the jury, and everyone watching that I was nothing but a gold digger who married her for money. Her lawyer, Blake Morrison, the man she'd been sleeping with for the past 8 months, nodded enthusiastically in agreement. His smug smile suggested he thought this was already won. Then Judge Patricia Andrews looked down from her bench, adjusted her reading glasses, and said something that made the entire courtroom go silent. "So an annual income of $550,000 is still considered gold digging, Mrs. Hayes? Is that what you're telling this court?" Victoria's face went from confident to confused in half a second. "What? How much?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Blake's smug expression melted into shock. And I sat there at the defendant's table, watching my wife of 12 years realize she never actually knew who I was. My name is Nathan Pierce. I'm 39 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had a pretty good marriage. Not perfect, but solid. The kind where you finish each other's sentences and know how the other takes their coffee. Victoria Hayes and I met at a charity fundraiser 13 years ago. She was a rising executive at Hayes Corporation, the technology consulting firm her father had built from nothing. I was working as a financial analyst at a mid-tier investment firm, pulling decent money but nothing spectacular. Before we dive deeper into this story, if you're enjoying what you're hearing, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think happens next. And don't forget to like this video. It really helps the channel grow. Now let's get back to the courtroom drama. Victoria was magnetic from the moment I met her. She had this energy that filled whatever room she walked into. Dark hair, always. Styled perfectly. Designer suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And eyes that could read a profit and loss statement faster than most people could read a menu. She was brilliant, ambitious, and when she focused that attention on you, it felt like standing in sunlight. Our wedding was featured in the business section of the Chronicle. Victoria Hayes, newly appointed VP of Operations at Hayes Corporation, marrying Nathan Pierce, Senior Financial Analyst. Her father, Gerald Hayes, gave a toast about how happy he was that his daughter found someone grounded and practical, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by her success. For the first few years, everything was good. Great, even. We bought a house in Riverside Heights, one of those restored Victorian mansions with original hardwood floors and a view of the city. Victoria threw dinner parties for her business associates. I managed our investments and kept our financial house in order. We talked about having kids someday. Maybe after Victoria made partner, maybe after I made managing director. But somewhere around year 7, things started shifting. Victoria got promoted to Chief Operating Officer, then Executive Vice President. Her hours got longer, her business trips more frequent, and our conversations shorter. She started looking at me differently, like I was part of the furniture she'd stopped noticing years ago. I tried to talk to her about it, suggested couples therapy, weekend getaways, anything to reconnect. But Victoria was always too busy with quarterly reports, board meetings, acquisition deals. And I started to notice other things. New perfume that she only wore on business trip days. Her phone constantly face down on the table. Mysterious text messages that made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in months. Then came the charity gala last October. Hayes Corporation was hosting their annual fundraiser for childhood literacy programs. Victoria insisted I attend despite usually preferring to skip her work events. She said the optics were better with spouses present. I should have known something was wrong right then. I wore the Tom Ford suit she'd bought me for our 10th anniversary, showed up at the Four Seasons Ballroom where 500 of the city's elite were drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's car payments. Victoria was holding court near the silent auction tables, laughing at something her new corporate attorney was saying. Blake Morrison. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of practiced charm that comes from years of billable hours and morally flexible ethics. I watched them together for maybe 20 minutes before I understood. The way he touched her elbow when making a point, how she leaned in when he whispered something, the private jokes that made them laugh like teenagers. My wife was having an affair with her lawyer, and neither of them was even trying to hide it anymore. I didn't confront them that night. What was the point? If someone wants to cheat, they're going to cheat regardless of what you say. Instead, I went home, poured myself 3 fingers of scotch, and started thinking about what came next. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later. I was working from home, reviewing a client's portfolio restructuring, when the courier knocked. Victoria had them delivered to me at the house like she was serving notice on a defaulting tenant. No conversation, no explanation, just a stack of legal documents with little yellow tabs marking where I needed to sign. I read through them carefully. That's what you do when you've spent 15 years analyzing financial documents for a living. You read the fine print, and the fine print in Victoria's divorce filing was absolutely brutal. She was claiming I'd contributed nothing to the marriage, that I'd been living off her success for 12 years, that I was, in her lawyer's carefully chosen words, a gold-digging spouse who married above his station and now expected to be compensated for his parasitic lifestyle. She wanted the house, the investment accounts, even the car I'd bought with my own money 3 years ago. And she was offering me exactly $50,000 as a settlement to walk away quietly. I sat there in our kitchen, the same kitchen where we'd had breakfast together every Sunday morning for 12 years, and I realized Victoria had absolutely no idea what I actually did for a living. She thought I was still working as a financial analyst, still pulling maybe $80,000 a year at some mid-tier firm, still the same guy she'd married 13 years ago, who was grateful a woman like her even looked twice at him. But I wasn't that guy anymore, not even close. 8 years ago, I'd left the investment firm and started my own wealth management company. Pierce Capital Advisory. I started small, just me and a shared office space, managing portfolios for small business owners and mid-level executives, people who'd built something real and needed someone trustworthy to help them grow it. I worked 18-hour days for the first 3 years, building relationships, proving my worth, showing clients that I could deliver returns without taking stupid risks. The business grew. I brought on 2 junior advisors, then 5, then 12. We moved into a proper office downtown with glass walls and ergonomic chairs and a coffee machine that cost more than my first car. My client base expanded to include doctors, lawyers, successful entrepreneurs, people with serious money who needed serious expertise. By year 5, Pierce Capital Advisory was managing over $400 million in client assets. Last year, we crossed $800 million. My personal income between management fees, performance bonuses, and profit sharing hit $550,000. I was on track to break $600,000 this year, and Victoria had no idea. None. Because I'd never bothered to correct her assumption that I was still just Nathan the financial analyst. I worked from home most days, kept my own office separate from our shared life, and never felt the need to compete with her success. She was building her father's empire. I was building mine. I thought we were partners in parallel progress. I was wrong. The thing about being a financial analyst is you learn to plan for contingencies. You learn that people lie, markets crash, and the only person you can really trust is yourself. So 6 months before Victoria filed for divorce, right around the time I noticed the affair starting, I'd done something I'm not particularly proud of, but don't regret at all. I hired a private investigator, Detective Raymond Cole, former police detective turned professional truth finder. I gave him 3 months and a $15,000 retainer to document everything about Victoria's relationship with Blake Morrison. Every hotel meeting, every business trip that wasn't actually about business, every lie she told me about working late. Cole delivered a file 3 inches thick. Photos of Victoria and Blake entering the Riverside Hotel every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Credit card statements showing Blake paying for Victoria's jewelry, designer handbags, weekend getaways to wine country. Text messages between them discussing their future together, how they'd handle the divorce, how much they expected to take me for in the settlement. The most damning piece was a recorded phone conversation between Victoria and Blake discussing their strategy. They'd deliberately undervalued my career to make it seem like I'd been living off Victoria's income. They planned to paint me as a kept man who contributed nothing while she built her empire. Blake had even coached Victoria on what to say in court, how to present herself as the victim of a mercenary husband. They thought I was prey. They had no idea I'd been 3 steps ahead for months. When the court date arrived, I showed up in a suit that cost less than Victoria probably assumed. My lawyer, Jennifer Martinez, was someone I'd known from business school. Sharp, methodical, and absolutely ruthless when she needed to be. She'd reviewed Cole's investigation and smiled in a way that made me glad she was on my side. The courtroom was packed. Victoria had made sure of that. Her entire executive team was there, showing support for their embattled CEO. The business media had gotten wind of the case, probably from Victoria's public relations team. They wanted this to be a story about a powerful woman standing up to a gold-digging husband. They were about to get a very different narrative. Blake Morrison stood up first, his silver hair perfectly styled, his $3,000 suit pressed to perfection. He launched into his opening statement with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a case he didn't deserve to lose. Your Honor, this case is quite simple. Mrs. Victoria Hayes, CEO of Hayes Corporation, married Mr. Nathan Pierce when he was a struggling financial analyst making approximately $80,000 per year. Throughout their 12-year marriage, Mrs. Hayes has supported Mr. Pierce financially, emotionally, and professionally. She provided him with a lifestyle he could never have achieved on his own. $1 million home, luxury vehicles, access to social circles far above his station. He paused for effect, looking at the judge, then at me. And now, facing the dissolution of this marriage, Mr. Pierce expects to be compensated for what? For living off his wife's success? For contributing nothing while she built a billion-dollar empire? This court should recognize Mr. Pierce for what he truly is, a gold digger who married for money and now expects a payday for his parasitic lifestyle. Blake sat down, looking satisfied. Victoria reached over and squeezed his hand under the table. The gesture wasn't lost on anyone in the courtroom, including Judge Andrews, whose expression suggested she'd already formed some opinions about this case. Jennifer stood up slowly, adjusting her reading glasses. She didn't rush, didn't grandstand, just walked calmly to the center of the courtroom and addressed the judge directly. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Nathan Pierce, would like to clarify some misconceptions about his career and financial contributions to this marriage. With the court's permission, I'd like to enter into evidence Mr. Pierce's tax returns for the past 8 years. Blake stood up immediately. Objection, Your Honor. This is a transparent attempt to... Overruled, Judge Andrews said, cutting him off. I'd very much like to see these tax returns, Mr. Morrison. Please continue, Ms. Martinez. Jennifer approached the bench with a folder containing 8 years of my financial history. My tax returns, my business formation documents, my client contracts, everything that proved Pierce Capital Advisory was real and thriving. She handed copies to the judge, to Blake, and to Victoria. I watched Victoria's face as she opened the folder, watched. Her eyes scanned the first page. Watched the exact moment she saw my income for last year. $547,892. Her face went completely white. Blake was looking at his own copy, his confident expression crumbling like wet paper. Your Honor, Jennifer continued, Mr. Pierce is the founder and CEO of Pierce Capital Advisory, a wealth management firm currently managing over $800 million in client assets. His company employs 15 people and has been profitable for 6 consecutive years. Far from being a gold digger living off his wife's success, Mr. Pierce has been quietly building his own empire while Mrs. Hayes was apparently too busy with her career and her extramarital affair to notice. The courtroom erupted. Whispers spread through the gallery like wildfire. The business journalists were frantically typing on their phones. Victoria's executive team looked stunned. Furthermore, Jennifer said, raising her voice slightly to be heard over the commotion, we have documented evidence that Mrs. Hayes has been conducting an affair with her attorney, Mr. Blake Morrison, for approximately 8 months. An affair that included fraudulent misrepresentation of Mr. Pierce's financial status in legal filings, deliberate attempts to devalue his contributions to the marriage, and conspiracy to defraud him of his rightful share of marital assets. Jennifer walked back to our table and pulled out a second folder. This one contained Cole's investigation. Photos, credit card statements, hotel records, text messages. Everything that proved Victoria and Blake had been planning this together. Judge Andrews took the folder and spent 10 minutes reviewing it in complete silence. The only sound in the courtroom was pages turning and Victoria's increasingly panicked breathing. Finally, the judge looked up. Her expression was not pleased. Mrs. Hayes, Judge Andrews said, her voice cold enough to frost glass. Would you like to explain to this court how a man earning over $500,000 annually qualifies as a gold digger? Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked at Blake, who was staring at the table like he wished he could disappear through it. "And Mr. Morrison," the judge continued, "I'm particularly interested in understanding how you, as an officer of this court, filed documents claiming Mr. Pierce had minimal income when even basic due diligence would have revealed the truth. Unless, of course, you deliberately chose not to conduct that due diligence because it didn't fit your preferred narrative." Blake stood up shakily. "Your Honor, I relied on information provided by my client." "Your client who you're sleeping with?" Judge Andrews interrupted. "The client you have a clear conflict of interest in representing? Please sit down, Mr. Morrison. I'll be forwarding this matter to the State Bar Association for review." Blake sat down like his legs had given out. Victoria was crying now, but they weren't the sympathetic tears. She'd probably practiced in front of a mirror. They were the tears of someone whose carefully constructed lies had just collapsed in spectacular fashion. "This court will take a 30-minute recess," Judge Andrews announced. "When we return, we'll discuss an equitable division of assets that actually reflects reality rather than Mrs. Hayes's apparent fantasy about her husband's career. And Mr. Morrison, you are removed as counsel of record effective immediately. Mrs. Hayes, I suggest you retain new representation who hasn't committed actionable ethics violations." The gavel came down with a crack that felt like thunder. During the recess, Victoria tried to approach me in the hallway. Jennifer stepped between us immediately, but Victoria pushed past her. "Nathan, please," she said, her voice desperate. "We need to talk about this. There's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. "Victoria, you tried to paint me as Gaidase, a gold digger in open court. You've been sleeping with your lawyer for 8 months. You filed for divorce without even bothering to find out what I actually do for a living. Which part of that is a misunderstanding?" "I didn't know," she said weakly. "You never told me about your company. You never said you were making that kind of money. You never asked. In 12 years of marriage, you never once asked about my work. You just assumed I was still the same guy you married, content to live in your shadow, grateful for whatever scraps of attention you threw my way." Blake appeared at Victoria's shoulder, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 30 minutes. "Mr. Pierce, perhaps we can discuss a reasonable settlement." "You're not her lawyer anymore," Jennifer said flatly, "and anything you say to my client could be considered further ethics violations. I suggest you walk away before you make this worse for yourself." Blake opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Victoria, and I saw something pass between them. Fear, maybe, or the realization that their plan had blown up in their faces. When we returned to the courtroom, Victoria had new counsel. Melissa Grant, one of the city's top divorce attorneys, who looked absolutely thrilled to be cleaning up someone else's mess. She approached Jennifer immediately and asked for a private conference. They disappeared into a side room for 20 minutes. When they emerged, Melissa looked grim and Jennifer looked satisfied. "Your Honor," Melissa said when court resumed, "my client would like to withdraw her previous settlement offer and negotiate new terms based on accurate financial information." "I imagine she would," Judge Andrews said dryly. "Mr. Pierce, are you amenable to settlement negotiations, or would you prefer this court to determine asset division?" I looked at Victoria. She was staring at the table, her perfect composure completely shattered. Part of me wanted to drag this out, make her suffer, through weeks of court proceedings where every detail of her affair and her lies would become public record. But another part of me just wanted it over, wanted to move forward with my life without her in it. "I'm willing to negotiate," I said, "but I want full disclosure of all assets, including any accounts or property Mrs. Hayes may have hidden in anticipation of divorce. And I want it in writing that she acknowledges the fraudulent nature of her initial filing." Judge Andrews nodded approvingly. "Mrs. Hayes, do you agree to these terms?" Victoria nodded miserably. "Yes, Your Honor." The settlement took another 3 weeks to finalize. Victoria got to keep the house, which I didn't want anyway. It held too many memories of a marriage that turned out to be an illusion. She also kept Hayes Corporation, obviously, and her substantial retirement accounts. I got our investment portfolio, which I'd managed and grown significantly over the years. I got the lake house we'd bought 5 years ago that Victoria had never liked. And I got a 7-figure cash settlement that Jennifer negotiated based on Victoria's income far exceeding mine during the early years of our marriage. The business media had a field day with the story. CEO's gold digger accusation backfires when husband's real income revealed, read one headline. High-powered executive caught in affair with attorney, read another. Victoria's reputation took a serious hit. The board at Hayes Corporation issued a statement supporting her, but several major clients quietly took their business elsewhere. Blake Morrison faced a formal ethics investigation. Last I heard, he'd resigned from his firm and moved to Arizona to start over. His wife, who he'd apparently been planning to divorce once Victoria's settlement came through, took him for everything in their divorce proceedings. Karma has a beautiful sense of symmetry sometimes. As for me, Pierce Capital Advisory is doing better than ever. The publicity actually helped my business. New clients started calling, saying they wanted someone who understood both money and integrity, someone who'd built something real without needing to advertise it. My team expanded to 20 advisors. We're on track to manage over $1 billion in assets by next year. I bought a penthouse downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the mountains, minimalist furniture, a home office with 3 monitors, and complete peace. No one lying about where they are or who they're with. No one making me feel small for being successful in my own way. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from Victoria. She was crying, saying she'd made a terrible mistake, that she never appreciated what we had together, that she wanted to try again. I listened to her entire speech without interrupting. When she finished, I said something that felt surprisingly easy. Victoria, you spent 12 years looking at me without actually seeing me. You created a version of me in your head that fit your narrative, and you never bothered to check if that version matched reality. That's not a marriage. That's an audience watching a performance they wrote themselves. But Nathan, she said, her voice breaking, doesn't 12 years mean anything to you? They mean everything to me. They taught me that success means nothing if the person you're sharing it with doesn't respect you. They taught me that being underestimated can actually be an advantage. And they taught me that sometimes the best thing that can happen is having your old life torn down completely, because it makes room for something better. I hung up before she could respond. There was nothing left to say. Victoria wanted to rewrite history, but I was done being part of her story. These days, I focus on work, on building something that actually matters. I'm dating someone new. Elizabeth. She's a professor of economics at the university. Smart, funny, and actually interested in what I do for a living. We talk about markets and behavioral finance over dinner. She asks questions about my clients and my strategies. She sees me for who I actually am, not who she wishes I was. We're taking it slow. No rush to define anything or make grand declarations. Just 2 people getting to know each other honestly, without pretense or performance. Last week I ran into Gerald Hayes at a charity event. Victoria's father. The man who'd given that toast at our wedding about being glad his daughter found someone grounded and practical. He approached me carefully, probably expecting anger or bitterness. Instead, I just shook his hand and asked how his grandkids were doing. Nathan, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. I knew about your company. I've known for years. I should have said something to Victoria. Should have made her pay attention to what you were building. I just assumed she knew. Gerald, it wasn't your responsibility to manage our marriage. Victoria made her choices. We both have to live with them. He nodded sadly. She's not doing well, you know. The board is pushing for her resignation. Too much scandal, too much drama. They want someone who can focus on the business. I felt a small pang of something. Not sympathy exactly, but not pleasure either. Just acknowledgement that actions have consequences. I hope she finds what she's looking for, I said, and I meant it. Whatever that is. The truth is, I don't hate Victoria. I don't even think about her much anymore. She's just someone I used to know. Someone who taught me that sometimes the people who claim to love you are really just in love with their version of you. And when your real self doesn't match their fantasy, they'll blame you for their disappointment rather than admit they never really knew you at all. My name is Nathan Pierce. I'm 39 years old, and I run a wealth management firm that's about to hit $1 billion in assets. I drive a car I bought with my own money, live in a home I chose for myself, and sleep through the night without wondering what lies are being told in the next room. Victoria called me a gold digger in open court, expecting me to crumble under the accusation. Instead, I proved that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most to say. You just have to give them the right moment to speak. And when that moment came, when Judge Andrews asked Victoria to explain how a man earning over $500,000 annually qualified as a gold digger, watching her face realize that she'd destroyed herself was worth every moment of silence I'd maintained for 12 years. Some people need to be the center of attention. They need the spotlight, the audience, the performance. I've learned that real power doesn't announce itself. It just is. Victoria wanted to write a story where she was the successful one and I was the parasite. But she forgot that every story has two sides, and the truth doesn't. Care about your narrative preferences. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell me what you would have done in my situation. And don't forget to like this video. Until next time, remember that sometimes the best revenge is just letting people underestimate you until the moment it matters most.